we can get started, and our panelists don't need much introduction. They're incredible, and they'll be introducing themselves. I'll go in alphabetical order, start with Alice Johnson, then Dontae Sharpe, and Elenore Wade. And the plan is each of you to talk just, for 5 or 10 minutes about your own work and experiences surrounding reentry. And, we want this to be interactive. I have questions, but we'll be taking questions from the audience. So all of you who are joining us, please post questions in the chat, and we want to have as interactive a discussion as we can on Zoom. So I'm Brandon Garrett. I direct the Wilson Center for Science and Justice here at Duke Law School. I'm a law professor. Our first guest today, we're so pleased to have with us for the first time here at Duke Law, Alice Marie Johnson, who's a criminal justice reform advocate and former federal prisoner who was granted clemency. She was granted clemency in 2018. She's the CEO of Taking Action for Good Foundation, TAG. She's an author and advocate and a renowned leader and speaker. She was one of 4 women in the world designated as a women's right defender at the United Nations on International Women's Day in 2019, so just 2 years ago. We're also very pleased that Alice Johnson has agreed to join the advisory board for our Wilson Center, which has just been formed, and we're really grateful in advance for Alice's willingness to share her energy and her insights to our center here at Duke. Second, we have Dontae Sharpe, who is a great friend of all of us here at Duke Law School. He was exonerated in North Carolina. He now works at Forward Justice here in Durham. He was wrongly convicted in Greenville, North Carolina in 1995. And after our local federal appellate court, the Fourth Circuit, reversed his conviction in 2010, his appeals were handled by our wrongful convictions clinic here at Duke Law School. So a number of our students worked on his case, and finally his motion for appropriate relief was granted in state court in 2019. He'll tell you more about his story and his reentry. He certainly had opportunities to reenter sooner. During his 24 years in prison, he rejected several plea offers that would have given him a lesser sentence. He wouldn't do it. And Dontae has been, since his release, not only working at Forward Justice, but really been a welcome citizen of the law school. He's come to events, he's come to classes, and shared his insights with our students and with lawyers here. And we really value him for sharing his wisdom with us and his passion for justice. And we hope before too long he can come again in person, and we can all gather together like we've been doing. Really pleased to have Professor Elenore Wade with us. So Eleanor teaches as a visiting associate professor of clinical law and Friedman fellow at GW Law School's Prisoner and Reentry Clinic. And I think it's an incredibly exciting thing that reentry clinics have started to open at law schools around the country. Previously, before joining GW, Professor Wade worked as an Equal Justice Work Fellow at Bread for the City in Washington, D.C., where she conducted weekly on-site legal clinics at family homeless shelters and practiced family public benefits law and assisted clients in accessing and identifying documents. All of that work, public benefits, family issues, there's so many different fields of law that are implicated by reentry. It's at the intersection of civil and criminal and poverty law. So we're really looking forward to our conversation today. And I'll mute myself in a second. We'll start with you, Alice, and then move to Dontae and to Eleanor. And thank you so much again for sharing your lunchtime hour, all of you out there. Please raise your hands in the chat or post questions in the chat, and we'll start moving towards Q&A after our speakers introduce themselves and their work. So starting with you, Alice, thank you.
Thank you, Duke University, for having me on today. It is really a great honor for me to be here speaking to you virtually. I wish I was there in person. I can't wait to tour your university and also be a part of the things that you're doing there. Reentry. When I think about my own reentry back into society, I think about someone coming out of a time zone, a time warp. That's what it felt like for me. because when I went to prison in 1996, there was no internet. So when I came out, the entire world had changed around me. I was in this bubble and I knew nothing about phones. I knew nothing about Facebook or Twitter or these type of platforms, Zoom platforms. I recall when my daughter picked me up from prison that day, that I heard someone speaking in the car who said, begin route. It scared me to death. It was her GPS. And I think maybe that was Siri who was speaking to her, telling her how to get back to her home from Alabama. But my journey was a very long journey. Thank you, Brandon, for the introduction. I was originally offered just to give you a little bit of context for those who don't know as much about my story. I was a first-time nonviolent offender. I'd never been in trouble in my life. I was offered 3 to 5 years for my role, which was a minor role in a drug conspiracy. I made the decision to go to trial, and I was convicted of attempted possession and sentenced to life plus 25 years without the possibility of parole because there is no parole in the federal system. Upon my release, having been incarcerated for almost 22 years, upon my release, even though I received a commutation, I still had the weight of being on probation for 5 years. People would see me out, could see me at the White House, see me at events speaking, but at any moment, anything could have triggered a violation. There's so many collateral consequences, so many things that are put in place that can trigger a probation violation, which would have landed me right back in prison. For myself personally, that was a heavy, heavy weight. And I'm sure it's a weight that many returning citizens face. And unlike some other returning citizens, I didn't have the I didn't have the obstacle of trying to find employment because I came out already having employment waiting on me. Even though I had a life sentence, I never stopped planning for one day re-entering society as a free woman. So I had job opportunities lined up. So I didn't have some of the obstacles that I saw other women had who recidivate, who came right back in. Prison became a revolving door because when they came out of prison, they were locked out of good jobs. I've said that they're locked in when they're incarcerated, and then when they're set free, they're locked out of employment opportunities. Thankfully, I believe it was December of 2019. In fact, it was December 17th. The Fair Chance Act was signed into law, which impacted those who were seeking federal employment with federal agencies or with contractors. It allowed those who had criminal records uh, or any convictions to be able to have a more of a level playing field where if they were qualified for a job, their criminal background, their past would not keep them from interviewing. Basically, it was banding the box. Now, after the job had been secured, the employer still had the right to do a criminal background check upon that applicant, but it didn't automatically exclude those from being able to apply for the job. That was a huge win for those who had criminal records to be able to apply for a good job. Many companies have followed suit and are now doing the same thing, but there's way too many who have not followed suit and just giving us, and I call it us because I'm one of them too, of giving us an opportunity. When I received a full pardon last year in August, that was like the biggest weight that was lifted off my back. I celebrated that the way that I almost celebrated my release. Of course, nothing could compare to my being released back into the arms of my family after over 2 decades in prison. But one thing that I saw in the stories that I heard from the women who returned back to prison was obstacles that caused them to reoffend again. And as I said, employment opportunities was a big thing. Also, having an opportunity for housing. Housing is a big thing. And many people return back to the very things that brought them into prison because the situations have not changed. They were still locked out of opportunities for housing. When I came home, I had a terrible experience myself with insurance. With having 2 weeks after I returned home from prison, I got very ill. I don't know if it was food poisoning, or if it was nerves, or if it was just a culmination of just being overwhelmed by walking into this new world. I ate something, I had to go to the hospital. I was so sick. I didn't have any insurance because coming out of prison, most don't have insurance. So I was stuck with this huge hospital bill, and I'm trying to rebuild my life that I'm really just now paying off. I had to pay it in increments because of no health insurance, no transportation. They come out without transportation to even get to a job. Another huge thing that I face and that those others face is having identification. There has to be changes where when a person comes out of prison, that they come out with identification. I couldn't open a bank account. There's not too many things that you can do without identification. Even if you're stopped and you have no identification, it's trouble that's going to follow you. So there are so many obstacles to reentry that causes recidivism. Those obstacles must be removed. And one of the things that I've done, Brandon, since I came home, the organization that I founded, Taking Action for Good, a big piece of that, I fought for clemencies and pardons also, but sitting square in the middle is reentry. I help those who are returning get what I call their freedom legs, because they come out like me. I know how it feels. I have practical knowledge, not just thinking about having a theory of what a person might need, but from my own experience, I wanted to be able to help those who were re entering society get a leg up. People are not looking for a handout, they just want opportunities. I have never heard a woman who was incarcerated say that when I go home, I'm going to start back into criminal activities. They want to go home, get a job, get housing, be productive citizens, take care of their families, reintegrate back into society. So I'm really working hard to help in those areas of reentry. And I cannot uh, not leave out the mental health aspect of it. There are so many who also need mental health when they come out. So I help identify those needs. But I'll pass this on to my brother here, who is who's a fellow prisoner, uh, to talk about reentry also.
Thank you so much, Alice. Dante.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dante Sharpe. I want to thank first y'all for letting me come speak to y'all. I was sitting here listening to her, and it just it comes to me a lot, that it's a privilege for people to let you speak into their lives, and especially coming from where we come from and know how people kind of look down on us too. A lot of society look down on an ex-prisoner, whether you were innocent or guilty, you know. But she said a lot of good stuff, a lot of stuff that was, you know, brought back memories. And when she was talking, I was just picturing when I was in prison, going to school and things like that. And I was thinking about reentry when she was talking, and getting out. I did 26 years, and when she said she had a life sentence, I had a life sentence for something, a crime I didn't commit, and did 26 years. I went in as a teenager and came out at 44 years old. About the phones and things like that. Everything was so different, the technology and stuff like that. And I was thinking about reentry when she was saying reentry, and just the name of the meeting, the program we have here, reentry. Reentering the world, society. It starts in prison. I learned that it starts with you in prison. when you first go into prison, you have to have that mindset that you're going to prepare for your reentry. Even though I was innocent, I still said that when I went in there. I said I got to be ready when I do get out, because I always had hope that I was going to get out. I didn't know it was going to take that long. I just didn't know when, but as far as my reentry into society, it was kind of up and down. It's been kind of up and down, emotionally, physically, financially. It's been because of the job I got from Forward Justice. Because when I was in Greenville, I left Greenville and went on to Durham because of Reverend Barbara, Teresa, Duke, Forward Justice, and a lot of other people helped me. Teresa always said it took a village, and it did. It took a lot of people, to help me on the physical aspect and some of the emotional aspect, because there's some certain parts of the emotional aspect and the mental aspect nobody can't really help you with unless you open up your heart and your mind to people, and that's kind of hard. Now, I used to think it was just hard for a male, but it's hard for females too, especially when they've been through ordeal like that in prison, when you got so used to and you did a lot of time to where you had to close your emotions off and close off certain parts of yourself to not let the system, the prison life environment seep inside of you. That was a big fight for me, especially having a life sentence when you don't see no light at the tunnel, so to speak, even though I did have hope. But my reentry part, I struggled in. The main thing I really get now is the mental part, as far as it's a little fear still with me because of the freedom that's out here. The freedom, when I say that, I'm saying people are free to come in your house and kill you. See, in prison, you got fences around you. You got guards walking through, they locking the doors. But out here, prime example, we just moved in a house, so I'm in Charlotte now. And somebody in this nice neighborhood, it's a nice neighborhood, friendly, kid friendly, but somebody that's broken the car out there in the yard. We've been here probably 2 months, and ever since then I haven't felt safe, because I feel like if they're bold enough to come to the yard in this neighborhood, that they're bold enough to come in your house. So there's no fences, and my sleep patterns are thrown off because of here, because I'm always expecting somebody to try something crazy because of what I went through. I wake up 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning every day. That's why I was yawning a while ago, because I've been up since like 1:30, and it's constant. And I go back to sleep during the day, in the morning sometimes. Then I fall asleep heavy at night. But that's part of the impact, and the part about the jobs. When I first got out, I filled out applications. I wanted the job. I had never worked a job in my life or cashed a check in my life. So I filled out a couple of applications at a furniture store and places like that. And one furniture store I called, when I heard my name, hung up on me. I called back, and I figured that was because of the notoriety behind my case and all the marching and stuff in Greenville and things like that went on. A lot of people kind of scared to touch me. So I called the job back, and when she heard my name again, she hung up again. I said, dang, so I won't trip, and that got to be what it was. So I got tired of trying to get jobs. Then I didn't have no kind of background. My background was prison and prison jobs, but I just found out that you can use your prison job on the application, but you know how that is. And by me being innocent, I have to get my record expunged. That hasn't happened yet. We're working on that. When I got out, when you're innocent and you get out of prison, they really open the doors. It seems like they kind of angry at you or punishing you for being innocent, and they put you out. And when you get out, you don't have nothing. The same program that's offered to a guilty person are not offered to an innocent person. Only thing you can do to hope you get a pardon of innocence from the governor, which I haven't received yet. We're working on that, trying to get that. Or you can have a civil suit, and those they're not mandatory. You might not get there, or you might, or if you wait 5 or 6 years. So when you get out being a wrongfully convicted person, it's really more difficult than people think it is, and it's sometimes better off if you're guilty getting out, because you have more options. You got, you can go to the social service to get food stamps. They got different programs set up for a person on parole that a parole officer can help them get. But being innocent getting out, you don't have none of that. If it wasn't for Forward Justice, Duke Wrongful Conviction Clinic, Reverend Barber, and all the other people that helped me. It's so many, I can't name them all, that helped me before I got out and since I've been out. You know, if it wasn't for that, I would have been, you know, just an innocent man that got out. So that's why I left and went to Durham, and then I'm in Charlotte. And now I talk to guys. I do a lot of public speaking on voting rights. I speak on the COVID-19 in prison, trying to get guys out. We got a victory recently, 3,500 people getting released. Second Chance Alliance, getting people second chance, getting the records clean, expunged, so everybody can have a second chance. I do just a lot of speaking and interviews on news stations and things like that. And like I say, it's a privilege to be able to do it. I'm gonna be expanding, hopefully in the future. I'm trying to be patient. I learned patience in there, and it's a blessing to be out, and I have proved my innocence. You know, I turned down all those pleas because I was innocent and knew I was innocent. I could have went home years and years ago. You know, they offered me time served so many times, but it's just hard to say you did something when you know you didn't do it. And I was raised like that. I was raised from the country on a little farm. You know, them roots was bred in me, so to speak. You know, to stand for what you believe in, to stand. You know, I didn't know I had it in me. I didn't know the things that my mom and aunt and them and uncles them was saying to me had soaked in like that about being strong and things like that. Because, you know, I was weak at times, but overall, when I went through it, came out, the reentry part is really up and down. You know, society is not stable. Prison is kind of stable to a degree. So when you get out here in the society, it's like an ocean with waves up and down, you know. But you'll get used to it when you get out. You know, you got to make an effort to do anything you do out here. And the one thing that I see about reentry that is time. Out here, everybody is fighting for more time. You know, don't have enough time, rushing, about to run you off the road on the highways, you know, trying to get somewhere on time. But in prison, you trying to get rid of time. You're trying to find something to do time, make time go faster, you know. So that's the thing, you know, I'm just adjusting. It's been a good adjustment. You know, I'm a granddaddy, grandchildren with me all the time. My daughter, we didn't have a relationship because she was born while I was in prison. So, and I didn't know the impact that going to prison, guilty or innocent, had on your family until I've been home almost 2 years now. And I've seen the emotional trauma that's happened to my mother and my brothers and my daughter, even my grandkids that are young, you know, and everybody that knew me and dealt with me before this, you know, before I went to prison. And it really was deep and traumatic. I didn't know it and understand, and financially, you know, because my mother and family was sending me money and keeping me with money so you don't have to ask people for stuff and things like that. And it was really tough on there. And I'm just finding that out. You know, I really am just finding that out. So reentry, it's a lot that we can do to better it when people get not guilty or innocent. But being guilty, a lot of people have to be informed about it, because in prison, they kind of don't give it to people that's got life sentences because they feel like you're not getting out, you know. So you really don't get the chance unless you be one of the ones that happen to get a contract where you sign to say you won't get in trouble and they'll let you out in 3 years. They give you a contract. But if you got a life sentence, you know, you don't get to talk about reentry or get to go take any of the classes in prison because they figure you're never getting out, figure it's a waste of time, you know. I didn't mean to go like that, but I just, you know, so yeah, I'm gonna pass it on to Miss Wade.
Thank you so much, Dante.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having me. And thank you so much, Ms. Johnson and Mr. Sharp. I'm honored to be here on this panel with you. And also, of course, a little disheartened to hear that it seems the harrowing experience of reentry is just as harrowing everywhere in the country as it is here in DC, where I work with students and clients on reentry and release issues. As Brandon said, I'm a visiting associate professor of clinical law and a teaching fellow at the George Washington University Law School in Washington, DC, and I teach in the Prisoner and Reentry Clinic. And so what our students do in that clinic is that we try to respond to what the community seems to need at that time with regard to the types of prisoners we represent. And so what that's meant for us in the past year or so is we largely have been working on compassionate release cases because of a piece of federal legislation as well as a piece of local legislation that allows some of the oldest and sickest prisoners in the country to be released prior to the end of their sentence. And you know, just speaking from that specific perspective, one thing that we've noticed in particular is that, and this is kind of related to what Alice said, is that many of our clients are expected to be able to get out and be able to navigate these complex systems that exist, but some of them have, you know, they've never seen a cell phone, they've never seen a computer, and they're just told, you know, call this number, go to this website. And it's such a fragmented system, and it's so hard to access. And if you don't have a lot of experience accessing systems like that, it's really hard, and it's hard to be given the runaround. And in our compassionate release cases, the release happens so suddenly. And I've really never seen anything like this in my life prior to compassionate release. But the thing that we see happen now is the court grants our client's motion, and then literally the next morning they are on a bus or a plane and they are on the way back to DC. And, you know, we never know when to expect that court order. And suddenly, you know, someone who's been in prison since 1971 or 73 or, you know, even 1990 is suddenly just thrown back into the world and expected to live in that world and in even a more organized way than any of us who have not been incarcerated recently would be expected to. You're just expected to have to do so much when you first get out. And I think that, you know, I come from the experience of having several family members incarcerated when I was a child growing up in Detroit. And I just remember there being very few resources. And so I thought, well, now I work and teach and live in Washington, D.C., where you can find a nonprofit to help you with anything, or you can find a legal services organization to help you with anything. But what we've found as our clients are getting released is that the system is so fragmented that there's not really kind of one place or one agency that sees it as their responsibility to coordinate reentry. And we actually do have an agency like that in here in DC, but our students who have been working with our recently returned clients have found that it's sort of another place that just kind of gives you a phone number to call. And that can be really tough to deal with. So, you know, all of the issues that Dante, you mentioned about IDs and stuff, these are all things that we could start to take care of these while folks are in prison. I think I saw someone in the chat recognize, you know, why are we not ordering social security cards for people who don't have them? It's a simple process. You're, you know, sitting in a prison that has all your records that proves that, you know, they know who you are, but we're not doing those things. And so I think that what my perspective on it is just seeing this infrastructure that isn't designed to accommodate people. It's almost more like an obstacle course that you have to get through in order to be able to live your life on the outside. And, you know, it shouldn't be that you'll do better if you're on parole because, you know, your parole officer has good resources for you. Those resources should be available to anybody, and we shouldn't count on continued correctional supervision to accomplish them, because, you know, our whole philosophy is that if someone's out, they're out, and they really shouldn't be, you know, under continued supervision just to get the resources they need. And so that's a huge mismatch that we see. And, you know, speaking from the perspective of how some of our students have been experiencing this, you know, I teach at a law school where people often our students come and they get excited and they work on a case, and then the motion gets granted and they're like, well, we did our jobs, welcome home, and, you know, like sort of, you know, have a great life. And we've been, you know, really, we've been having some discussions in our clinic among our students about, you know, what can we be doing to support people, and what should we be doing as attorneys to talk about what it's going to be like once somebody gets out, because these are conditions that we know about that someone who's been in prison for 40 years might not know anything about. And so I think that's an important thing, you know, just from the practicing lawyer perspective, is to think about, you know, when does your job begin and end, and what can we do to support people? Because I think we certainly know that, you know, the rest of your life kind of begins the day that you get out. And we don't have a lot of resources for people. So we're in a position of trying to figure out, you know, what can we do? How can we facilitate that and make it easier? And a really unfortunate thing that we're finding out often is that when you have trouble getting a resource that you're fully entitled to, one of the things that a lawyer can do for you is call that person up and say literally the exact same thing that you told them and get you the benefit. And so that's another thing, is kind of these public systems, they're not trained to trust people who are returning citizens, who are trying to navigate their own reentry. And they shouldn't be trained to only do something that you need when a lawyer calls or when a social worker calls. These need to be systems that are accessible to everyone. And right now, unfortunately, we're not seeing that. But where we do see it, and where I would love to see our institutions better mirror a lot of what's happening in the community, is that the support among families and communities for people returning is incredibly awe-inspiring. I've seen people who said, well, I haven't seen this person in 20 years, but sure, he can, you know, live in my extra room, or I'll go pick him up from, you know, the bus stop, or he could stay with me for a few days. And that kind of support, that kind of community support, is really stepping in where a lot of institutions are failing people. And I would like to see institutions learn more from our communities about what it really means to welcome people back. And I would love to see something like that happen, rather than these sort of sterile, faceless institutions that don't necessarily have an idea of specifically what people are dealing with when they come out of prison. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the session, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. And, you know, everything that you've been saying has been triggering lots of really interesting questions and comments and reactions on the chat. It's hard to even know where to begin, but there's some really, really interesting questions that I wanted to share with you all, and see what you each had comments on. Where to begin? One question was about the emotional side of this, and specifically mental health resources. And so one of the questions that was Kenya Dalton just posted was, what behavioral health resources are available during reentry? And I'm also interested, for those who are engaging with reentry issues right now, I mean, just even when they are available, the provision of behavioral health resources during the pandemic, there must be, I've certainly been hearing from my colleagues at Duke Medicine about the special challenges right now. I'd be interested in your reactions to that side of reentry, the behavioral health side, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's mental health.
Well, from my standpoint, from what I have been seeing with people who have recently received clemency, and like compassionate release, clemency, these rounds of clemency, the ones I've been involved with, they are immediately released also, just as I was. An hour and a half after I received the news, people probably saw me running across that road pretty fast for a 63-year-old woman to rejoin my family. But as I've been able to help those who have been released navigate, who needed mental health, I immediately contact the state. Unlike people that work strictly in the state. People who receive clemency on the federal level are spread out all around the country. So I find out what is being offered in the town that they're in the cities that they are in to help with mental health. And I try to get them literally crisis mental health, because when they come out, some of them are so afraid. I've had one individual that was so afraid upon their release that I had to help them get immediate help. The families were closing in, they didn't understand. And something that Dante said, when one person goes to prison, their families do that time with them. My family did every single day of those 21 years, 7 months, and 6 days that I was incarcerated, because they weren't totally free. So the families really, sometimes they have unrealistic expectations. That person has not been with them for 2 or 3 decades, and they are expecting the same person to come home. And that becomes overwhelming for some people, because they can't live up to those expectations. And they need someone to intervene. They need someone else that they can talk to, who will understand what they're going to. Some go in, if a substance abuse was not identified as a part of their crime, well, they never received any substance abuse treatment in prison. So they come out not having been given the treatment that they needed. And so we have to find someone that can help address those issues too. So it varies from state to state, from city to city, what is available for a person who needs mental health treatment. And I just want to back up just a little bit. I'm such a believer that there are so many people who don't need to be in prison. I happened to be in a facility that had general population, but also had a mental health in and a mental health out part of the facility. And just seeing the people that were in those units, prison was not the answer. They needed help. And to recognize that, and to have prison guards who really, some of them are, well, they're not really trained to be mental health specialists. It's just like having police now who may enter a crisis, be in a situation where someone really needs mental health. Well, they're not really trained to address that. It's the same as officers. And so people come out needing mental health help. And so that needs to be assessed. But as with compassionate release, with clemencies, those things are, when you're released immediately, you really don't have time to address those. But even with probation, because most people come out there still on probation, that's where a good probation officer can come in, even though I know that they're not mental health experts. I think that that should be just a part of someone who spent years in prison. It's just having someone to talk to other than family, to see if there are mental health needs that exist.
Yeah, and your point about family is so important too, because it's something we always talk about when we talk about incarcerating people. We always talk about what it does to communities and families when so many people are locked up. But then when someone gets out, we're like, everything's fine now, you've been restored, congratulations to your community. And we know it doesn't really work that way. So just like people read books to prepare for what it's going to be like to welcome a baby into their home, it's important for people to have some kind of resource to understand what someone might be dealing with when they return from prison, and how best to respond to that, and how they can support that person. And this kind of reminds me of what Dontae, you were saying about, how hard it is to get the kind of material relief that you need when you actually spent time in prison for something you didn't even do. And that's also an area where I've increasingly heard people talk about, like, what would it look like to give reentry support to a community in addition to an individual. So so it's similar to kind of the reparations context, is if we say, especially, you know, if you were innocent and we want to make you whole once you're out, we know that it wasn't just you that was harmed. We know that it was the community that was harmed by your absence and harmed by the resources that were put into incarcerating people rather than giving them resources. And so people just sort of end up back in the same situation, which is why I think it's so vital that we consider families as part of the reentry process. But as you know, it's, you know, if you're a family member of an incarcerated person, you can't just walk in somewhere and qualify for something that's for returning citizens, you know, if you want mental health services or something like that. So it's definitely something I think we should consider when we're thinking about, you know, what do we want our reentry infrastructure to look like, and what should people have? We just cannot forget about communities and families.
Well, I was offered, I had a getting out wrongful, getting out after getting exonerated, getting out, when I was released. I didn't have nothing, you know, none of that. So, but like you say, I didn't really notice that about my family and the community, because it affected my community. The trust towards between the police department and the district attorney office and the people, the trust was down, because we did a lot of marching and things like that with Reverend Barber, Al Sharpton, and all the different people, and, you know, different press conferences and things of that nature. So it was a lot of tension in Greenville behind my situation, and people really already didn't trust the police or the system. So after my situation, they really didn't. They really don't. And when I got out and went home, I didn't think, you know, my family was that. But now, as time is going by, I'm seeing it in my brothers, my mother, you know, my close family members, and some of my not so close family members that I wasn't around so much, but they still was around me. It really affected a broader community, you know, and people focus on me more, but I was seeing that I could get the help, but me getting help and going back to living with my family, and they didn't get no help because they didn't have no programs, couldn't afford it. That was kind of good. That could draw me back into, you know, it would be hard for me to come out of it, because I'm the type of person, I hate the people I love, you know, I hate people around me to be down and I'm up, you know. That's not, I believe in people going up with me. I like to take people with me, you know, and I know if I would just got help and they didn't, I was going right back, you know, and it's my whole family, you know, I didn't realize it. It is my whole family that was affected deeply. You know, my mother even started affecting her physically, you know, my brother, them more mentally, emotionally. One of them still kind of cried just talking about it, the youngest. He about 40, you know. And it's so much that it does to your family. And it's not gonna take just no 1, 2, 3, 4 times, even if you do get help. It's so deep, it's gonna take a long time. Because it happened all those years, like you say, they was locked up with us, you know. It was just like they was in prison. And people say that, it sounds cliche at times because people say it and use it so loosely, but it's not cliche, it's real. You know, it's really real. And it affected my daughter, and she wasn't even born when I got locked up, but she grew up while I was gone and went through all of that. My grandkids, they're 5 years old. One is 6 and one is 5. And they're even say, Granddaddy, you were going to prison. They talk about prison, you know, to me when they see me, because they know I was in there, and they kind of, you know, and it's so much that's been in there's no, because the average person can't afford counseling to go to no therapist or nothing like that. The average person, because it's, you know, it's high. You can get, they probably can go through social service, but it's going to take long because the way the system's set up, and like you say, with the coronavirus right now, you know, but it really has affected our family members so much in the community. And I didn't see it like that, but I did. The longer I be home, the more I see it, you know, and so much light will be focused on us, whether we guilty or innocent getting out, that they're not really focusing on the community. It's like, I'm gonna give y'all back this person and we're gonna help this person. But the person that, and it's, don't get me wrong, it's not their fault that the person, that whether they were, if they were guilty, you know, going to getting locked up, nothing like that, don't get me wrong. My situation is different, but it's still things that we have to do. If you're trying to fix that, you got to fix more than the person that's getting out. That person need more. It's more than just about that person. You know, it really is, because the whole community need to be made whole. You know, from family, because families make up communities. So you got to help the families. You know, I'm part of the family is part of the community, and the community as a whole is a part of the city. And, you know, so that's what we need to do, try to come up with something, you know, to help the whole process, the whole pie, so to speak.
Well, Dante, one thing that I have seen a change that has been taking place in this nation. Much of the stigma of being an incarcerated person, a formerly incarcerated person, the stigma that the families felt too, it's like the veil of shame has been lifted. More people are talking about, and they're not so ashamed to say that I have a loved one who's incarcerated. Even those who are incarcerated now are feeling even the benefits of this being so broad now, and people talking about it, having these type of dialogues, having people speak at different places. I've been speaking at many, many different places, and I've had family members come up to me and ask me what can they do to help their loved ones. A lot of this change that is taking place is because so much of the stigma and the shame of having a family member who's formerly incarcerated or is incarcerated now has lifted. So just getting this out there, the healing process is taking place, is continuing to happen in my family. Because like Dante, I came home to grown grandchildren, not small ones. I had a couple of small, but they were mainly grown. So I'd missed all of their lives. They talked to me on the phone, they visited me, but they didn't know me as a free grandmother. And so really, I'm finding that to be the fun part of us getting to know each other. I'm just happy to be back at home with my family. I know I don't have all of the solutions. All of this is healing, but it is such a joy to just be back in the community and to be back with my family. And together we are working out all of our issues.
You know, one approach that a few people are mentioning in the chat, which I wonder if it helps people with adjustment, helps with the feelings of shame. Some people were talking about the role that peer support can play in reentry, where it's available. I mean, it's obviously not available a lot of places, but for someone who is themselves reentered to be able to give advice and to counsel. Are you all seeing more resources for that, more of a focus on developing peer support networks? I know, you know, in the innocence community, there's an emphasis at the network conference every year. We want exonerees to talk to each other about what they went through and what reentry was like. I know here in North Carolina, there's some more work being done to try to make that available. But
so a big gap there. And part of what I do in my organization, TAG, is those who have been released, they then become a support person for those who are being released, who are released, and they check in on the others to see what their needs are, what they're going through, and also to have a listening ear. You know, we're just really getting this. We're kind of feeling our way through the dark right now, and we're using our own experiences to help those who are coming home. So the peer part of it is extremely important because they'll talk to us before they'll talk to you.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so important to have somebody to talk to who maybe doesn't have a specific goal in mind except to listen to you, which is kind of not the typical types of programs that we want, like that we make available for people. So it's like, I see some people in the chat saying like, to qualify for this, you have to have a substance abuse disorder to qualify, you know, for this. And so it's like a peer support, which I would love to see that built up more, would be something that actually just provides a space to discuss things with people, and also might make people feel a little bit more comfortable. You know, maybe if you've got someone else to talk to this stuff about, maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable around your family because like you've had the chance to process those things. But unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that infrastructure here. I think that the way in which we see you know, people who were formerly incarcerated sort of used as support is more on the kind of anti-crime side of things. It's sort of, you know, reach out and squash neighborhood fights or something like that. And I don't want to say that that's not valuable, but there should be times that we're providing just pure support to people. So if peer support isn't gonna, you know, stop some other crime, that's fine, because what it's doing is benefiting the person who is reentering. And so we really need to recognize the expertise that people have and the uniqueness of that experience, because people have a lot to say about it. And unfortunately, I really don't see a lot of peer support type stuff happening here in DC. And although there are tons of informal networks for it, but it's a little bit harder for the folks who are already kind of isolated from that community to enter that. And so that's a difficult thing. And it's just really not something we see, which reminds me of another thing I wanted to mention that I've seen in some of the comments, which is there's one issue in reentry, which is not knowing about what is available. But then there's the other problem, and especially we see this with housing, where you know the thing you need and the thing you want, but it's just not available. And so that's the other thing that I want to encourage people to think about, you know, broadly is, what do we need more of for everybody? Because often it's people who are returning citizens or people who do have criminal records who are getting excluded from this stuff because everyone's saying, oh, you know, we only have so much of it to go around, and who are we going to give it to? You know, this innocent person or this person who has a record. And so that's why we see all these restrictions on who can live in public housing and all of this stuff. And it having not enough housing for everyone allows us all these opportunities to decide who's deserving enough to get it. And so one of the things that, you know, I always think about is what can we do in our communities to make sure that everybody's needs are met, and that everybody always intentionally includes people who are reentering, because then we'd really have a landscape of resources that's actually helpful. Because if somebody is searching for a resource, they should be able to find it. You know, we've got enough money for it. We just need to kind of put those things into action. And so I do want to be clear that it's not just that people can't navigate this system. Sometimes this stuff it's just not available.
On navigating the system, I also thought it was really powerful. I think Dante, you talked about this, and we have some stuff in the chat too, just basic things like getting a driver's license, getting basic ID documents. I remember an exoneree that I worked on his case when I was a lawyer. I spent weeks trying to get him his driver's license in Georgia, I think, and his birth certificate was in Brooklyn, and he couldn't go to Brooklyn. And anyway, it was a nightmare getting that driver's license for him. But just the basic documents you need to then get insurance or to get a job or to show who you are. There's some people in the chat just saying how outrageous it is, how hard it is even to get an appointment to get a license.
Well, in my situation, man, you know, when I came home, being exonerated, and people saw it on TV and the news, and everywhere I went, people coming up to me, hugging me, giving me money, and making me feel uncomfortable. but you know, I got somewhat a little favor in that area, because I went to the driver license place and I was so nervous. I went probably a couple of weeks after I was out, and everybody seen me, people pointing. Me and my mom went in the place, and I kind of felt like a kid, you know. I was kind of ashamed, not ashamed of going to prison. I was ashamed when I was in prison, when I had went to the doctor and things like that. And shame is part of the, you know, I guess the punishment they say with the visible shackles and things of that nature. But I was shamed. I felt like a kid all over again. My mama having to take me by the hand and take me in here and teach me this, and that my pride kind of rose up a few times, and it still does at times, you know, with its technology and things like that. So when I went to the driver's license place, the lady was looking at me funny, and I'm like, oh, I see, that's me. And she was, oh yeah, I saw you on TV, this and that. And that allowed her to help me get my license and encourage me. And even the lady I was riding with in the car, when I went and took the drive, I'm nervous then. They think we were gonna make it. And she was, you know, talking to me. And all my case and my exoneration being on TV and the news allowed them to kind of help me and people to go a little bit above and beyond. Oh, they shouldn't have done you. I'm gonna do this. Or you went through this, you don't need to go through no more. So I'm gonna do, you know, that type. But everybody don't get that. So like she said, you know, there's like Ms. Wade said, you know, there are things that it's sometimes it's just not available, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it's so many sometimes. It's so many, you know, and part of it too is how the system is set up too. You know, to be real about it, the system is set up, from what I saw from being wrongfully convicted. If a system don't want to, I went to everybody, governors, wrote Obama, went to, you know, city council people, mayors, and everybody. A lot of people, politics played a big part in it. People are scared to touch things like that. But if your system that's set up to, I guess, control our society, if it don't want to see the truth, that tell you a lot about it anyway. You know, that tells you a lot about our system and people. If you don't want to see the truth and fix the truth when you've seen a wrong has been done and it's been like that and been going on, that shows me that the system really is flawed badly, and it don't need to be, you know, tweaked enough. It need to be totally revamped, changed. And that might not never happen, but we still can change and add something here and change something there over the year. We might not see it in our lifetime, but like I say, things take time, and dealing with the system, it really takes patience and long suffering to get what you want, to accomplish your goals when you're dealing with the system, you know, and with these changes that we talking about here, and with the reentry program and things like that, just to bring it all the way down to the bare bones of, you know, you got flawed people running a flawed system. So you can believe all the way they use the system is gonna be flawed, the way it come out. So, you know, I know it better than anybody probably, you know, because I went up and down. You know, I went through all the courts, back down, appeals, MARs, habeas corpus, everything corporate, anything you could name over all them years, you know. But eventually, through my hope, faith in God, and a little patience, because I want patience most of the time, it happened. And so I always look at myself and I tell people, it's gonna happen, the change gonna come. It's already in the process, like Alice was saying. This is the time, and I believe this is the time to push as much as we can all the agendas about reentry, you know, the criminal justice reform, second chance, all voting, everything. I think this is the time right now. You know, a lot of people think you pull back during COVID or sickness or disease and things like that, but this really is the time to not let fear set in. And they can't stop us because we got this technology where you still can get it out there. You know, and I believe this is the time, and through patience and long suffering, we're gonna get what we're fighting for.
We could talk a little bit about COVID and the pandemic. I mean, as a lawyer, it's been, I thought that given our constitutional law and given the role of our courts, that we would see courts and also, you know, governors, they were issuing all kinds of emergency orders during the pandemic. I expected the courts, lawmakers, executive branch, I expected them to be doing large-scale releases, particularly vulnerable, medically vulnerable older inmates. I thought compassionate release, geriatric release would take on a new life, and that it would happen fast because there was an urgency to act a year ago. And a year later, obviously, as we all have seen, there's been just a trickle of releases. and the litigation. You know, lawyers filed lawsuits. Lots of great friends of ours, colleagues of ours filed lawsuits all around the country. You know, lawsuits against practically every jail and prison in the country. And we saw them running up against a wall for the most part in the judiciary, or when judges did act, they got reversed. Here and there were some exceptions, but it was really telling to me to see judges say, oh, no, you know, it's not our job. And governors issuing all kinds of emergency orders. But when it came to releases, and as jails and prisons became viral epicenters, oh, I don't know, that's, you know, we'll let the prison authorities handle it. Everyone's kind of passing the buck around. I mean, do you think that there is some hope that something positive will be learned about how we put so many people in our local jails, detention centers, prisons, lives at risk? So many lives were lost because of the refusal to do community reentry on large scale. Here and there, a few cases, you know, a few dozen cases in Durham. Sounds like there may be a larger release in North Carolina now because of the settlement of the lawsuit, which is great news. But you know, a few cases here, a few cases there is not going to save lives, and we've had hundreds of thousands of lives lost. And is anyone going to learn something from this? I mean, it's terrifying how poorly prepared we were for the pandemic, and how predictable it all was, and how few people did anything to act.
I heard prisons being called petri dishes because there is no way you can social distance in a prison. Your cellie gets it, or you're in there with 6 other people, 8 other people, even if there's 2. There is no way that you can socially distance in prison. There's just no way. And someone had to bring it into the prisons, and they usually come in through staff. But one of the entities that has not been mentioned very much in the compassionate releases, and that is the role of the prosecutor. The prosecutors have fought so hard against prisoners receiving compassionate releases because they are still angry about a crime that may have taken place 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And so they fight. So it's not just up in the,
Yes.
It's not up to the warden, it's not up to the judge, really, because the prosecutors step in, and well, it really is ultimately up to the judges, but the prosecutors have so much power in who gets compassionate release, because many are still fighting that person as if they're retrying a case, and many have aged out of committing any crimes, because the percentages, the statistics tell us we have to be smarter about who we let go, that these, even if there was a violent crime committed, and so many cases are characterized as violent crimes when there may not even have been violence. There may have been a weapon that was in that person's car, in their home when the crime was committed, and now they are labeled as a violent criminal because there was a gun there, a violent charge. So it's the prosecutors are really given a lot of power in the courtrooms to sway or to not allow a compassionate release to go through because of them fighting that person so hard, who they don't even know anymore. They just know about a crime that was committed 20 years ago. And the first thing they'll say based on this, when that person no longer poses a safety risk to the community, retribution has been enough. So why are we still keeping them incarcerated? But that goes back to a broken system, to things that need to be changed in our criminal justice system. And I think that the more that we are exposing these cracks and these big flaws, the more that we as citizens must act. If you see something that is wrong and you step away from it and you do nothing about it, when you've got the opportunity to use your voice, to use your vote, then you are now a part of the problem.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to the COVID conversation, I have to hop off and right after this to teach class actually, but I think I echo what everyone else said, and I think the one thing that I would take away from litigating these compassionate release cases in particular during COVID is that we really have the opportunity to do that now, basically because of COVID. And the one thing that it has done that I will say that I appreciate being able to do is actually being able to educate judges about what it means to be in prison for as long as our clients have been in prison, because the people who apply for compassionate release are typically people who don't have any other avenue to get out of prison. So they're going to be serving to the end of their term, or they're going to get compassionate release. There are no more appeals. There are no more, other ways to get out. And so this is the first time that judges and in our area of work have actually gotten the opportunity to encounter people that they sentenced to decades in prison, and they're seeing the havoc that prison can wreak on your body, physically. They're seeing what it can do to your mental health, and they're also seeing how different someone is even 10, 15 years after they show up in your court, after being, convicted of a crime. And that is something that I really think courts had very little exposure to. And so I feel glad to be able to stand before a judge in a court and be able to say, look at who this person is. This is not the person who you're reading about in this pre-sentence report from 1990. And, you need to understand who this person is, because they require a second look, at their case. And so I am glad that we've been able to do that. But yeah, I've got to agree that, I think we always thought maybe something will happen because of COVID, but I think it's just another example of how, without kind of taking that pressure and turning it into some kind of organized, pressure, that things may not happen. But I am glad to be able to share folks' stories in service of their release. And I've got to go, but thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Eleanor.
Bye.
And we can stay for another 5 minutes. We want to make sure that our students and others can get back to their lives, and we're really grateful for all of you for sharing your time with us. But let's keep talking for 5 more minutes if you can.
I was just thinking, well, I was listening to Ms. Alice, and she said a lot of things, and when I hear the compassionate release, really, I think when you're sentenced by the DA and even some judges, and even jurors, people think that because you committed a crime or been accused of committing a crime, that you don't deserve no compassion or nothing like that. They think your punishment is punishment, and you're supposed to be punished. That's it. I had guys call me. This is crazy because guy called me from prison last night about the compassionate release. He said his family sent him something, and the compassionate release article and thing, and he saw my name in it, speaking about it. And he got my number from one of my other guys that be calling me, and I try to look out for the guys, send him money and things like that. And he just got over COVID-19 himself. And he said, man, I would have never thought I had it. I stayed away from everybody. I had a t-shirt on. They stopped giving them masks because they run out of them and things like that. And he was like, man, I didn't think, and I had it. And they put me put him in segregation because he had COVID-19. So they punish you for getting sick. There's nothing that they can do, really. And then they start back shipping people in and out from some of the worst COVID-19 camps, he was telling me. And then the other guy is like 64, 65 years old, been down 31 years. He called me a couple of months ago crying, scared, because everybody in the block was getting taken out with COVID-19. He hasn't got it yet. He hasn't attracted it yet, but he's scared because he got high blood pressure and things like that. And he called me the other day. He was talking about, man, it's crazy. It's like a petri dish, a cesspool up in here. He said, man, it's crazy with this COVID. And guys like they don't care, like it ain't real. I just heard about one of my cousins dying of COVID. Found out last week he had it, and he died this week. I just found out last night. So, it's real. And in prison, like she said, you can't stay 6 feet apart in prison. Your bunks in where I was at was probably 1.5 feet, 2 foot, probably 2 to 3 feet apart, like this, a little bit widen the screen a little bit. Literally, you had to turn the side to get in there. So if a man coughs, it's right there. And you can't walk around with t-shirt tied on your face. That's escape risk, things like that. It's so much, man, that goes with that, And like you say, when I hear compassionate released, you know, a lot of people think in the system, judges, DA, even jurors and people like that, they think that we don't deserve compassion, mercy, and things like that, you know, grace and things like that, you know, because a crime had been committed or you've been accused of committing a crime. And that's part of the reason, you know, part of the reason is hard-hearted people and people with misconceptions about punishment and prison and things of that. They don't get me wrong, victims, people happen, stuff happen to people, but at the end of the day, they're still human beings. We're still human beings that should be treated above animals. People treat their dogs better than they treat people in prison at times, I'm telling you, or they think they should, you know.
And you know, we haven't even talked about jails, but you know, people in prison don't leave prison quickly usually, or at least, you know, a felony sentence, it's going to be a year or more, obviously sometimes many years. So many more people each year cycle through jails and, you know, spend the night in jail, spend 2 nights in jail. And if you get COVID there, you're bringing it back to your family, your neighbors. It's, and we saw jails around the country slow down a little bit during COVID. Now jail populations in some places have crept back up or even are at capacity because trials aren't happening. And that's been really hard to watch. Like why are we, you know, why do we always need to arrest people for minor offenses, even medium offenses? You know, people are presumed innocent until they've been convicted of something. Why can't people enjoy their liberty unless they've been convicted of a crime and be safe during a pandemic? And that's been really hard to watch. We don't have any compassionate standards or medical or pandemic related standards for who should be put in a jail, right? It's normally the magistrates or whatever, the hearing officers, they're looking at, is this person a risk, public safety risk? Does this person pose a flight risk? Do I set cash bond or not? Well, how about, is this person medically vulnerable? Is this person going to lose their Medicaid in jail? Will this person potentially die of COVID if they're exposed in the jail? Like none of those questions get asked when you're deciding what should happen to someone just pre-trial, forgetting, and that's a whole other. And I suppose, you know, we talk about reentry, but you know, there's also the reentry when people leave a jail, you know, temporarily maybe, or for our lawyers in the crowd, do you have any last words of wisdom to our law students or to lawyers about what work lawyers can do to try to, I mean, obviously a lot of what we've been talking about is about resources, about peer support, about assistance, and about more resources before reentry happens, thinking about reentry months, years in advance, and about new attitudes towards who should even be in prison. Do you have any last words of advice for our law students, people who want to do this work? How can they make a difference?
Well, I would say my last words to the law students are mercy. Remember that these are your fellow human beings. Fight for them as if you fight for yourself. Be merciful. We want mercy, but sometimes we forget to extend mercy. And they really have a sacred position, and that is fighting for the lives of others. And take your calling, because it is a calling to be called as an attorney, as a lawyer. It is a calling because you not only hold that person's life in your hands, but you hold future generations in your hands, because that one person impacts their families, impacts generations to come. So I'm just looking forward to Duke University producing some of the greatest lawyers that this country has ever seen.
Well, I just say, you know, add on to what Miss Alice say is stay true to who you are when you enter the world, you know, from school and go into your profession. Choose wisely, you know, who you let mentor you, because you're gonna have mentors probably the rest of your life in each field. You know, people speaking into your life. Don't just let everybody speak into your life because, you know, all advice ain't good advice, you know, and, you know, when it come time for you to make that decision on whether you're a judge, DA, lawyer, to do what's right, you know, I'm not going to tell you to do what's right, make the right decision, because I don't know what the right decision might be for you. I know what I know what the right decision is. Always go with what's right, but you got to live with the consequences of what decisions you make. Nobody should control another person's will. All I can do is tell you, make the choice you feel is right and be able to live with it. But like she said, you at one of the best schools. I know they put out good lawyers and advocates and for the wrongful conviction, because Jim, Caitlin, Teresa, and everybody, you know, that I met, you know, they're real some good people. Listen to them, but also take all the knowledge and wisdom you're getting and put it all together and actually evaluate it, look at it, weigh it out and see if it meets moral standards, you know, not just your moral standard, but humanity's moral standards, and run with that. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Cannot thank you enough for joining us today. And thank you to all of you who are contributing questions and ideas on the chat. It was a really, really wonderful, rich discussion everyone was having on the side in the chat. And thank you just for sharing your life's work with us and your life's experiences. And hope others can watch this on video later. And I hope to have you back here at Duke and to share with us many, many more times, hopefully in person before too long. Thank you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Duke.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a good day.
Be blessed.
Yes, ma'am. You too.